If you strip away the edits, the memes, and the villa politics, Huda's behaviour forms one of the clearest psychological patterns reality TV has ever captured. But there's something far more unsettling than her reactions on screen: the complete and total absence of accountability. Huda has been given chances most people never get: second chances, third chances, 15th chances. Every time she explodes, cries, screams, or storms off, someone steps in, smooths it over, forgives her, or protects her. And instead of learning from the wreckage, she repeats the same cycle again and again. Like she's stuck, living in the exact same argument on a loop. There's a saying: the universe repeats lessons until you finally learn them. But what happens when the person never learns, when every opportunity for growth is met with deflection, tears, and anger, when accountability feels like an attack and consequences feel optional? What happens is what we're seeing now, because when someone is never challenged, when they're never told you crossed the line, when they're allowed to hurt people without making amends, they don't just avoid accountability, they start believing they're immune to it. They develop the belief that they can cry their way out of any situation, charm their way out of any conflicts, and shift blame until anyone's standing closest. And the people who love them, or think they do, start enabling them out of habit, fear, or familiarity. Because enabling can feel like love, even when it's killing someone's character in slow motion. Her fan base is the clearest example of this, a digital shield that treats criticism like violence, and violence like entertainment. A group that mistakes loyalty for silence and silence for support. But true care does not watch someone set themselves on fire and fan the flames. True care is accountable. True care is boundaries. True care is saying, I'm not going to let you destroy yourself or others just because I think you're entertaining. The lack of accountability has grown a life of its own. It's created a dangerous playground where people feel comfortable attacking anyone who challenges her, where racial slurs are laughed at on live streams, where real humans, Alandria, Shelley, Janae, Leah, become targets of hate, threats, and humiliation simply for existing outside of Huda's narrative. This isn't just messiness, this is a system of enabling that has spiraled far beyond the villa, a system that is now costing her partnerships, costing her reputation, costing her credibility, because brands can see what her fans can't. Association with chaos burns everything it touches. And the sad truth is, even I had to wait for the dust to settle before making this video. Not because I was unsure about my opinion, the evidence has always been there, but because her fan base moves exactly like she does: reactive, emotional, defensive, loud. That enable her because in her behaviour they see a reflection of themselves, a familiar chaos, a familiar wound, a familiar dysfunction. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's healthy, and that's where the story begins. The thing about people like Huda is this: the disaster never arrives unannounced. It starts quietly. A misunderstanding, a tone she didn't like, a question that sounded too pointed, a moment where someone else gets attention she thinks belongs to her, and then the spark. Maybe it's someone disagreeing with her. Maybe it's someone choosing another girl. Maybe it's simply someone saying no, a word she has never learned how to sit with. Because for Huda, no isn't a boundary, no is betrayal, no is disrespect, no is the beginning of war. What should have been a simple conversation becomes a meltdown in real time. Raised voices, chairs scrape, someone's face falls, someone's patience thins, someone who was having a good day is suddenly knee-deep in emotional chaos they never asked for. And then, once the explosion burns itself out, we get the tears. Not soft tears, but the overwhelming kind that hijacks the room, where the villain becomes the victim, the aggressor becomes the wounded, and everyone else is suddenly responsible for fixing the very fire she started. This isn't coincidence. This is a pattern, a cycle, A script she runs so consistently, the villa could have predicted it with timestamps. And still, they let her do it. They comforted her, they reassured her, they excused her. They said things like, she's just emotional, or she didn't mean it like that, or she's had a hard time. But empathy without boundaries becomes neglect. And neglect, emotional neglect, is the root of every monster we enable. People in the villa weren't interacting with Huda, they were managing her. Every word was softened, every truth diluted, every concern wrapped in a bubble so she wouldn't burst. Because the moment someone held her accountable, even gently, she weaponized tears, guilt, or anger until the entire conversation became about her pain, not the harm she caused. The villa wasn't peaceful, it was a pressure cooker. Every islander knew one wrong sentence could be the cause of the next argument. So they tiptoed, they whispered, they vented to each other privately. They said things like, I'm scared of how she'll react. I don't have anything left for her. I can't save her again. I'm drained. These are not the words of friends, these are the words of caretakers trapped in someone else's emotional storm. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Huda does not see accountability as love, she sees it as rejection. So when someone says, you hurt me, what she hears is, you're unlovable. When someone says, you crossed a boundary, what she hears is, you're being abandoned. And instead of slowing down, she speeds up, emotionally, verbally, explosively. This is not cruelty, it's fear disguised as cruelty. Fear of not being chosen, fear of being wrong, fear of losing control. But fear doesn't excuse harm, and harm is exactly what followed. At first, the consequences were interpersonal. People distancing themselves, people hesitating to pick her, people exhausted. But then the consequences turned public. Brands don't do chaos. Brands don't do unhinged. Brands don't do racial slurs on live streams followed by laughter. Brands do distancing. Brands do quiet PR exits. Brands do we no longer align with this behaviour. Because at some point, the apology isn't enough, the tears aren't enough, the explanations aren't enough, the pattern becomes impossible to defend. This wasn't one moment, this wasn't one mistake. It was a trail of red flags stretching from the villa to the real world, a trail others paid for with their peace, their safety, and their dignity. Olandria, Shelley, Leah, Janae, even random people who said the wrong thing on the wrong day. All of them became collateral damage in her cycle, because when someone refuses accountability long enough, they start outsourcing the consequences to everyone else around them. Huda's fan base isn't just defensive, it's reactive. They respond the same way she does. Emotional first, logic last, attack immediately, reflect later, if at all. They refuse loyalty with aggression, support with violence, love with blind allegiance. But love without accountability is not love, it's projection, it's dysfunction, it's a mirror. Her fans don't protect her because they admire her behaviour, they protect her because they recognise it. It feels familiar, it feels like home, it feels like their own wounds reflected back. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's good. Familiar chaos is still chaos. Familiar abuse is still abuse. Familiar dysfunction still destroys lives. There's one detail the show didn't highlight, one detail the public danced around, one detail her fanbase refuses to acknowledge. Every single person who becomes a casualty of Huda's behaviour has been a black man or woman. Jeremiah, Chris, Shelley, Olandria, different personalities, different conflicts, different circumstances, one pattern. Whether it was romantic partners, female friendships, or public fallouts, the emotional damage she created repeatedly landed on the same group. And the more you look at it, the harder it becomes to call it a coincidence. If you want to understand Huda's psychology, her patterns, her cycles, her emotional warfare, you have to start where the damage first took shape. With Jeremiah, He wasn't just her first connection, he was her first casualty. And the warning signs, they appeared before the villa had even unpacked their suitcases. Night 1, Day 0, Hour 1. When people were still learning each other's last names, still trying to read the room, still unsure of who they would even gravitate towards, Huda slipped and said, "I love you," to Jeremiah. An accident, she claimed. A mistake. But slips like that aren't harmless, they're revealing. Because that single moment foreshadowed a relationship already doomed from the start. It set a pace Jeremiah never agreed to. Fast, intense, emotionally loaded. And because Jeremiah is naturally warm and affectionate, he didn't push back. He didn't say, "Slow down." He didn't even realise he should. From that moment, they drifted away from the rest of the villa. They didn't get to know other people, they didn't explore options, they didn't build a foundation, they skipped to the end. Their relationship didn't grow, it consumed. No slow burn, no natural build, no space to breathe. Instead of testing compatibility, they locked themselves in. And this is the first pattern. Huda decided the emotional pace. Jeremiah adjusted to it. He never actually got the chance to choose it. A relationship can survive almost anything, except a foundation built on missing information. And for Jeremiah, the first fracture appeared quietly, not through shouting, not through drama, but through silence. For a full week, Huda withheld the most defining part of her identity. She was a mum. Not a fun fact, not a small detail, not something you casually sprinkle into conversation once you feel like it. A child is life-altering. It changes compatibility, readiness, emotional capacity, long-term decisions, everything. And she kept it from him. Not for a day, not until she felt comfortable, but until the emotional attachment has already formed. Until he was already invested. Until walking away would make him look like a heartless villain. Until honesty became a trap. Because Jeremiah had no idea that the version of love he was stepping into came with responsibilities he had never prepared for and had never chosen. And when she finally told him, after a full week, his reaction wasn't explosive, it wasn't judgmental, it was shock. He explained that he had never dated a woman with a child, never lived with one, never even spoken romantically to someone who was a parent. He was inexperienced, uncertain, not ready. But by the time he found out, ready didn't matter anymore. The emotional groundwork was already poured. The pace has already been set. The commitment had already been implied. And he wasn't given the chance to choose the relationship with full knowledge to make his own decision, knowing the entire picture of what he was signing up for. He was guided into it and then given the truth when it was already too late. This was the moment the power dynamic crystallized. Huda controlled the information, Jeremiah controlled nothing. And this is why the relationship could never work. Not because of the child, but because the truth arrived only after Jeremiah was already too entangled to walk away without consequences. What looked like romantic intensity was actually emotional entrapment disguised as vulnerability. And this one decision, this one withheld truth, shaped every meltdown, every explosion, every spiral that came after that. The first sign of Huda being territorial was when Amaya entered the villa. Nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. She came in as part of a challenge, a standard bombshell entrance. Her task was simple. Pick a boy, run to him, jump on him, kiss him. This is the kind of moment everyone shrugs off because it's just the game. But Amaya chose Jeremiah. She sprinted towards him, jumped on him, wrapped her arms around him, kissed him, exactly what production told her to do. And Jeremiah? He played along, respectfully, the same way every boy does when a bombshell enters. But for Huda, it wasn't a challenge or a game, or even a harmless moment. It was a threat. The second the challenge ended, Huda's tone shifted. No conversation, no grace period, no getting to know Amaya as a person. She labelled her messy, a bitch. Not because Amaya had wronged her, not because Jeremiah reciprocated, not because boundaries were crossed, but because a woman touched a man Huda had emotionally claimed after less than 24 hours. This was the moment the villa saw the first real pattern emerge. Huda interprets neutral circumstances as personal attacks. Her mind doesn't separate production challenge from romantic threat. If someone interacts with her partner, even when forced by the format, she reacts as if it was intentional harm, and Jeremiah felt that shift instantly, because Amaya didn't just kiss him, she triggered that pattern that confuses romantic stability with territorial control, and normal villa interactions with betrayal. And so, early on, before anyone realised the cycle they were about to witness, the first warning flashed. Jeremiah was not in a relationship where only he existed. He was in a relationship where every woman in the villa was now a potential enemy. And that's how quickly one kiss, in a challenge, became the foundation of a dynamic that would only get darker, louder, and more explosive from here. If Amaya's moment was the warning shot, Iris was the impact. Because unlike Amaya, Iris didn't enter during a flirty bombshell stunt. She entered during a villa-wide challenge where she had to kiss every boy. Every single one. No exceptions, no personal choice. A producer-designed moment. Routine. Predictable. Not meant to shake anything. But when Iris moved towards Jeremiah, the entire villa felt the air tighten. Huda didn't simply watch, she didn't shrug it off as a game. Her body reacted before her mouth did. She twisted fully towards them, leaned in, visibly tense, like someone bracing for impact, and then she snapped. Fucking back off my man. Loud, unprovoked, in front of everyone. Iris wasn't flirting, she wasn't choosing him, she wasn't targeting Huda. She was following the rules of the challenge, but in Huda's mind, context didn't matter, intent didn't matter, production didn't matter. All she saw was another woman touching Jeremiah, and that was enough to ignite something inside her that the villa had never seen before. This was the first time the public and the islanders witnessed the true emotional volatility behind her possessiveness. Because this wasn't jealousy, this was a territorial panic. A fear response disguised as aggression, a need for control that overrides logic, a belief that anyone interacting with her partner is automatically a threat. And the villa froze. Everyone felt that shift. Jeremiah wasn't free to just experience Love Island anymore. Every normal interaction now came with potential consequences. Every girl saw it, every boy heard it, and Jeremiah? He felt it. This moment mattered because it showed the first public crack. The moment when Huda's internal fears became external aggression. It was the start of her pattern. And when she feels threatened, she attacks. When she attacks, she feels justified. And when she feels justified, the relationship becomes a battleground. The Irish challenge wasn't drama, it was an early warning of every explosion to come. But by this point, the villa had seen enough. The territorial reactions, the emotional intensity, the way Jeremiah was constantly on edge, constantly monitoring the temperature of every conversation, constantly trying not to set her off. And the boys, who had no reason to interfere, pulled him for a chat. Not to gossip, not to judge, not to attack Huda, but because they were genuinely concerned. They told him gently that the pace was just too fast, that Huda seemed controlling, that he looked overwhelmed, that the situation didn't feel healthy. Jeremiah listened. He didn't dismiss them, he didn't get defensive, he didn't make excuses. He did the healthy thing. He took space, he pulled back, took a breath, tried to reflect, tried to understand his own feelings without noise. But when Huda sensed that shift, her reaction wasn't reflective, it was reactive. She didn't think, what are they saying that I'm not? She didn't ask, why would multiple people feel the need to say this? She didn't pause to consider her behaviour. She panicked. She immediately took it as an attack. She cried. She became emotional. She accused Jeremiah of not defending their relationship. She told him he should have protected them. She made herself the injured party. Again. This moment was crucial because when healthy people hear criticism, they think, maybe I just need to adjust. When emotionally dysregulated people hear criticism, they interpret it as abandonment. To Huda, the boys weren't offering insight, they were turning Jeremiah against her. And the moment Huda feels even a hint of disapproval, she doesn't self-reflect, she collapses into emotional crisis. This is the psychological blueprint that drives the rest of their relationship. Criticism triggers panic. Panic triggers deflection. Deflection triggers emotional overwhelm, and emotional overwhelm becomes Jeremiah's responsibility. So instead of widening the gap between them, Jeremiah did what he always ends up doing. He tried to soothe her, comfort her, reassure her, rebuild her emotional stability. He carried the weight of her emotions whilst never being offered space for his own. And this is when something irreversible happened. Jeremiah learned that any attempt at honesty would be met with tears, accusations, and emotional fallout. From this moment forward, the relationship stopped being a connection and became a cycle. By this point, the villa had seen enough. The territorial reactions, the emotional intensity, the way Jeremiah was constantly on the edge, constantly monitoring the temperature of every conversation, constantly trying not to set her off. Sometimes the biggest red flags don't come from the shouting, or the arguments, or the dramatic moments that the producers zoom in. Sometimes they show up during breakfast. Jeremiah woke up early and made Huda pancakes. Not a grand gesture, just something small, sweet, normal. But the second she tasted them, something shifted. Ugh, there's no protein. Oh my god, they're undercooked. Reasonable critiques, but delivered with irritation, with a harsh tone, with huffing and puffing and stomping around the kitchen. Instead of simply saying what she wanted, she dragged Taylor into it, asked him for help instead of communicating directly with Jeremiah. And Jeremiah stood there, confused, silent, trying to piece together why a kind gesture had suddenly turned into tension. This wasn't about pancakes, this was about pattern, a pattern that would define their entire relationship. 1. A small trigger happens. 2. Huda responds with emotional intensity. 3. Jeremiah tries to talk through it. 4. The conversation becomes too real. 5. She shuts down, cries, and walks away. And that's exactly what happened. When he approached her calmly and respectfully to understand what went wrong, to clear the air, to fix what was still salvageable, she didn't engage, she didn't communicate, she didn't meet him halfway. She walked away mid-conversation, crying, overwhelmed, needing space, but only once accountability entered the chat. And suddenly, the person who made breakfast became the person who ruined the morning. This is a psychological loop Jeremiah fell into. Her reactions became the crisis. The tears became the focus. Her emotions became the priority. And his needs, including his need to communicate, disappears. This moment wasn't just breakfast gone wrong, it was the blueprint, a cycle of instability where she reacts, he tries to solve it, she walks off, he ends up comforting the very person who created the conflict. The pancake incident didn't break them, it revealed them. Because once you see the pattern, you start to understand Jeremiah wasn't dealing with miscommunication, he was dealing with emotional vitality disguised as hurt feelings. And the walk-off wasn't just a coping mechanism, it was a reset button, a button that erased her responsibility and placed the emotional weight back onto him. After the pancake fallout, after the emotional spiral, after yet another walk-off, Jeremiah still tried to stabilise things. He always did. He wasn't someone who avoided hard conversations. He wasn't someone who played games. He tried consistently to repair what kept breaking. And then came the moment that exposed how fragile Huda's emotional world was. Jeremiah was speaking to Iris, casually, openly, honestly, and he said, "Huda's my girl, even though we've been having problems." It was a simple sentence, not disrespectful, not dismissive, not cruel. If anything, it was transparent. It wasn't pretending everything was perfect. He wasn't trying to make himself look good. He was acknowledging reality. But to Huda, honesty is betrayal. The moment she heard he mention their problems, her reaction wasn't curiosity. It wasn't calm questioning. It wasn't a desire to understand what he meant. She exploded. Anger, accusations, raised voice, emotion over logic, again. Because in her world, anything that threatens the image of closeness feels like a personal attack. This moment was small, but the psychology behind it was huge. Huda doesn't differentiate between transparency and disloyalty. If Jeremiah tells the truth, even gently, even accurately, she experiences it as rejection. And here's a deeper issue. To Huda, love isn't about patience, communication, or growth. Love is about alignment, about mirroring her emotions, about protecting her image, about making sure the relationship looks stable, even when it isn't. So when Jeremiah spoke openly about their problems, he violated an unwritten rule: don't expose the cracks. But Jeremiah wasn't exposing anything, he was trying to navigate the truth, and Huda reacted as if he had betrayed her trust. This is what psychologists call rejection sensitivity dysregulation. Even a neutral statement feels like heartbreak. Honesty feels like abandonment. Mild conflict feels like emotional danger. This was the beginning of a shift, a moment that showed Jeremiah that even honesty wasn't safe with her, a moment that told him, if you speak your truth, you will be punished. And once that lesson sinks in, a relationship stops being a connection and becomes survival. Next is the hot and cold loop and the trauma bonding in real time. After every explosion, after every walk-off, after every tearful exit, something strange happened. Instead of creating distance, instead of taking time to cool down, instead of actually resolving anything, Huda and Jeremiah would end up in bed together, laughing, touching, kissing, acting as if nothing had happened hours earlier. This wasn't reconciliation, or it was relief. The kind that comes after emotional chaos, when the calm feels deeper than it actually is, because the storm was so intense. And that's how trauma bonds form. Emotional highs, emotional crash, intense fear of loss, sudden closeness, temporary calm, repeat. It makes the relationship feel addictive, not because it's healthy, but because the highs feel euphoric compared to the lows. And Jeremiah got caught in this loop. It looks like chemistry, it looked like a connection, it looked like passion, but in reality, it was a dysfunctional cycle of fight, cry, walk off, make up, get intimate, reset, fight again. Nothing improved, nothing healed, nothing changed. It only deepened the psychological bond, locking Jeremiah into a cycle he didn't even realise he was participating in. To the villa, it was confusing. One moment Huda was screaming at him, the next she was curled up beside him in bed. To Jeremiah, it felt like a resolution, like things were finally okay, like the storm had passed. The storms didn't pass, they stacked, and every time they got physically intimate right after an argument, Jeremiah's mind learned the same lesson. This is how we fix things, not through communication, but through physical, emotional whiplash. This is why he stayed longer than he should have, why he kept trying, why he kept taking accountability for problems he didn't create. Because for every explosion, there was a moment of softness afterwards that made it feel worth salvaging. But trauma bonds don't heal people, they drain them. And by this point, Jeremiah had no idea that the next explosion would be bigger and more public than anything so far. The Lumberjack challenge should have been fun, light-hearted, silly, one of those filling moments producers use to break the tension in the villa. But for Huda and Jeremiah, it became the moment everyone finally saw the true cost of their relationship. During the challenge, Jeremiah had to kiss Alandria. It was his first time participating fully in a challenge. Everyone had to join in, everyone had to kiss. There was no romantic intentions, no secrets, no ulterior motives. But the second his lips touched Alandria, a kiss mandated by production, Huda's reaction wasn't normal jealousy, it wasn't discomfort, it wasn't insecurity, it was rage. Sharp, explosive, unfiltered. She didn't hold back. Her face changed, her energy shifted, the villa went silent, and the boys, who rarely comment on another couple's dynamic, said the quiet part out loud. Jeremiah needs to sleep with one eye open. They weren't joking. For the first time, the villa wasn't just uncomfortable, they were scared, because Huda's reaction wasn't just emotional, it was threatening. A level of hostility that made everyone realise it wasn't just a toxic couple's storyline, it was becoming unsafe. And Jeremiah felt it too. The way the room changed, the way the boys looked at him, the way Alandria stepped back, the way the girls exchanged glances. It was the moment the villa understood. This isn't relationship drama. This is volatility. This is someone who cannot regulate their emotions in even the most controlled, predictable scenarios. And Jeremiah was the one absorbing all of it, because Notice the pattern. When Amaya kissed him in the challenge, Huda attacked Amaya. When Iris kissed him in the challenge, Huda attacked Iris. When Alandria kissed him in the challenge, Huda attacked the entire situation. The common denominator wasn't Amaya, it wasn't Iris, it wasn't Alandria, it was any moment Jeremiah's attention wasn't fully hers. The Lumberjack challenge was the villa's wake-up call, the moment they realised this dynamic wasn't just draining the couples involved, it was poisoning the entire environment. And yet, the explosion hadn't even reached their peak because the recoupling that followed would finally make Jeremiah understand what the rest of the villa already knew. He wasn't in a relationship, he was in emotional captivity. The Lumberjack challenge was already a warning, but the public recoupling is where everything fully cracked. This time, the choice wasn't Jeremiah's, it was Huda's. It wasn't the villa's, it was America's, and America chose Iris and Jeremiah. Not because Iris was the one, not because the connection was deep, but because the public saw exactly what the villa saw. Jeremiah needed a way out. Huda wasn't chosen. She nearly went home. The moment she realised it, she didn't pause, she didn't self-reflect, she didn't consider the obvious that maybe her behaviour was the reason the public didn't root for them. Instead, she flipped the narrative completely. Oh, they're trying to protect me from his love bombing. They're trying to save me from him. Not once questioning whether the public was actually trying to protect him from her. And when Jeremiah didn't run to comfort her immediately, when he took a breath, processed the moment, let things settle, Huda reacted in the most explosive way yet. She stormed into the villa shower, crying, shouting, spiraling, and the words she used went small. Bitch, fucking, liar, loud, repeated, echoing off the bathroom tiles whilst the villa listened in silence. This wasn't heartbreak. This was humiliation erupting into rage, and Jeremiah hadn't even done anything. He didn't choose the recoupling, the public did. But in Huda's mind, Jeremiah was guilty because he didn't immediately run after her to soothe the wound of a decision he didn't make. Because they were a new couple, Iris and Jeremiah slept in the same bed that night. Standard protocol, and whilst the villa slept, they got a text. Secret date, right now, canoes, no warning. They left quietly in the middle of the night. When Huda noticed, she panicked. She woke Taylor up, crying, shaking, overwhelmed. In her mind, the date wasn't a part of the show. It wasn't random, it wasn't a production twist, it was betrayal, and she spiraled because her emotional world operates like this. If Jeremiah isn't in front of her, he's hurting her. If he isn't choosing her, he's abandoning her. When Jeremiah and Iris came back from their date, the villa was excited, curious, ready to debrief, but Huda didn't join. She didn't ask how it went, she didn't check in, she didn't acknowledge anyone. She ignored every single islander, walked past them, stone-faced, silent, retreating into isolation, and it wasn't silence that came from sadness, it was silence that came from punishment. Jeremiah was supposed to feel it. Iris was supposed to feel it. The villa was supposed to feel it. And everyone, they did. After this interaction, Jeremiah sat with the boys talking about the date. Normally, casually, as everyone does after a villa event. And Huda did what she always does when she feels out of control. She sneaked up behind them to listen. Not to join, not to communicate, not to understand, but to monitor. The moment she heard something she didn't like, a tone, a laugh, a detail that triggered her, even if it wasn't personal, she crashed out. Another explosion, another shouting match, another round of swearing, another meltdown in front of the entire villa. Jeremiah didn't have a chance to defend himself. Iris didn't have a chance to speak. The boys didn't have a chance to intervene. It was deja vu, the same cycle repeating, louder, darker, more intense every single time. And every time it happened, the villa became more certain. It wasn't love, this wasn't passion, this wasn't connection. It was emotional chaos, orbiting around one person and consuming everyone near her. After the secret canoe date meltdown, after the shower explosion, after the sneaking and the crash outs, there was only one step left in the pattern. Confront the woman Jeremiah was now coupled up with. And that woman was Iris. The problem is, Iris wasn't aggressive, she wasn't confrontational, she wasn't provoking anything. She was soft, level-headed, even intimidated by Huda, which is why the next moment disturbed the villa so deeply. When Huda decided she wanted to speak to Iris, she didn't approach with calm energy, she didn't ask for clarity, she didn't try to find understanding. She approached with the same intensity that had been building for days. Iris' reaction was instant. You could see it in her face. She wasn't annoyed, she wasn't defensive, she was scared. Scared of the tone, scared of the volume, scared of the unpredictability, scared of the way Huda's emotions kept erupting with no warnings. And the villa saw it too. The boy noticed first. The shift in body language, the tightened shoulders, the fear in Iris's eyes. They didn't trust that conversation to stay civil. So they stepped in, gathered the girls, Shelley, Amaya, Sierra, Alandria, and told them to sit with Iris and Huda to keep the situation safe. Not emotionally safe, physically safe, because nobody in that villa trusted Huda's ability to regulate herself when she felt threatened. And that's not an accusation, that's what they literally said. Sierra shared later on she was actually scared when Huda charged at Iris the previous day. This wasn't a love triangle, it wasn't drama, it wasn't petty jealousy. It was fear-based intervention, and once the girls formed a barrier between them, Huda's tone shifted, only slightly, but enough to show what the villa already knew. She behaves differently when there's an audience, when there's pushback, when there's accountability. But even with the girls' presence, the conversation didn't lead to closure. There was no real apology, no insight, no ownership, just emotion, intensity, just turbulence, everything except responsibility. This moment mattered because it proved one thing the villa had been suspecting since the Lumberjack challenge. Huda's reaction weren't just emotionally overwhelming, they were intimidating. And Jeremiah? He was always the one standing closest to the blast radius. By this point, the situation wasn't just about Huda and Jeremiah anymore. The villa was tired. You could feel it in the way people spoke about them, in the sighs, the side glances, the way everybody's shoulders dropped whenever they started again. After the secret date, after Huda sneaking up to listen to Jeremiah and the boys talk, after she crashed out and started shouting and calling him things like pussy and bitch in front of everyone, Jeremiah still tried one more time. He pulled her for a conversation, not to argue, not to attack, to find nuance, to find common ground, to see if there was any way to make this workable. He was calm, measured, trying to speak like an adult. And then it happened. In the middle of the conversation, Huda snapped. Her voice shot up, her emotions took over, and in front of the entire villa, she threw her water bottle, slamming it down, and started clapping her hands aggressively at him. It wasn't just loud, it was jarring. Everyone nearby stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence, faces changed. This wasn't an argument between two people anymore. It was an emotional scene the entire villa was being forced to sit through. You could see it on people's faces. Taylor, the others around them, everyone looked drained, fed up, visibly impacted. They weren't neutral observers, they were being dragged into the emotional crossfire of a couple who refuses to stop detonating. And Iris, who had been keeping track quietly from the sidelines, said what everyone was thinking. Jalen asked if this was the second crash out. Iris corrected him. No, it's actually the 15th, not metaphorically, not just for shade. She genuinely meant it. 15 times, 15 blow-ups, 15 emotional scenes the villa had been forced to absorb. At that point, it stopped being messy drama and became something else entirely. Emotional exhaustion for everyone involved. People started openly saying it was affecting their mental health. They were sick of it. They felt like they were living inside Huda and Jeremiah's relationship instead of living their own experiences. And this is the moment that matters psychologically. Jeremiah is there, still trying to find common ground, still trying to be reasonable, whilst Huda is escalating to the point where the entire villa is collectively worn down. He's trying to de-escalate. She's escalating in front of an audience. He's trying to talk. She's turning up the volume. And everyone else is now paying the price. After the water bottle incident, after the clapping, after the crash out, the villa had nothing left to give. Everyone looked drained. Tyler looked like he was spiritually exhausted. The boys were fed up. The girls were over it. Nick said it best earlier. It feels like we've been fostering one couple and don't have time for ourselves. So when the door recoupling was announced, a twist where any boy could stand in front of a girl's door and whoever opened it would be their match. This wasn't just another routine recoupling. It was a reset button. Huda went behind her door, Iris behind hers. Every girl stood waiting in silence, and Jeremiah made his choice. He didn't hesitate, he didn't look back, he stood in front of Iris's door. And when Iris's door swung open, The villa already knew what that meant. Jeremiah chose peace, not Huda. Huda's door stayed closed. That meant one thing. She was single and was vulnerable. And when she came out, she didn't break down quietly. She didn't reflect. She didn't ask why. She went straight for humiliation. She exposed private conversations in front of the entire villa. Well, Jeremiah said Iris isn't his type. He said he doesn't want to be in bed with her. He said he still cares about me. And then she hit him with, once again, you failed. Congratulations, body. You're a dick. Jeremiah didn't yell back. He simply said the truth. I didn't choose Huda because it was too toxic. That one sentence carried the weight of every argument, every crash out, every meltdown, every moment the villa had been forced to witness. Huda didn't take accountability. Instead, she threw out, enjoy your easy option, you're a scapegoat. And Austin, who had tried to stay neutral this whole time, finally said what the entire villa felt. I'm glad you went with the safest option because it was a circle of what the fuck. The craziest part, Huda still wasn't done. Huda didn't even wait 12 hours, not 6, not 3. The same night, the villa saved her with 8 votes. She turned the moment into a new crisis. Jeremiah and Iris slipped into the speakeasy to unpack the recoupling quietly. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't intimate. It wasn't secretive. It was just two people trying to process the chaos Huda had created. But Huda wasn't far. She was outside the closed doors, standing still, listening, not watching, listening. Listening for tone, listening for context, listening for anything that could reopen the loop between her and Jeremiah. It wasn't heartbreak, it was surveillance. And when she gathered enough to feel triggered, she didn't storm in, she didn't explode. She slipped through the door quietly and said, "Can I speak to Jeremiah?" Soft voice, controlled tone, but the intention was the same. Pull him back into the cycle. Iris looked at her like she had just watched someone rewrite reality in real time. We just saved her for her to do the same shit. And she wasn't wrong, because within 5 minutes of surviving elimination, Huda wasn't reflecting, she wasn't regrouping, she wasn't trying to break the pattern, she was reenacting it all over again. Even Tyler, who had spent the last few days drained by the never-ending chaos, walked into the speakeasy after seeing Huda sitting there, and his face said everything. Exhausted, defeated, done. This wasn't love, this wasn't closure, this wasn't healing, this was compulsion, the inability to stop looping back into Jeremiah, no matter how much damage it caused to herself, to him, to the villa. And then, still in the same night, she spun the entire situation into a narrative where she was the one under attack. In front of the girls, she declared, "I feel like I'm being slapped in the face." Not because she was treated poorly, not because the villa was unfair, but because Jeremiah got stability, safety, and emotional peace with Iris, while she was left to face the consequences of her own behaviour. To Huda, Jeremiah choosing calm meant he was punishing her. To everyone else, it meant he was finally free. The villa saved her, and she made the night about herself before the ink on the votes was even dried. After 2 restlessness weeks of emotional storms, after being love-bombed, shouted at, clapped at, monitored through doors, and dragged through 15 crash outs, the villa got a new bombshell, Adriana, and her entrance didn't feel like drama, it felt like oxygen. She wasn't intense, she wasn't chaotic, she wasn't reading into every micro-expression, she didn't weaponize vulnerability, she wasn't performing for attention, she was balanced. And Jeremiah, a man who had spent days walking on eggshells, finally exhaled. For the first time since entering the villa, he wasn't bracing for impact. Every time he opened his mouth, around Adriana, he wasn't being monitored, he wasn't being corrected, he wasn't being punished for how long it took him to comfort someone, he wasn't having to defend normal human interactions. He was just talking, laughing, being himself, and the villa saw it instantly. His shoulders dropped, his voice softened, he smiled in a way he hadn't smiled in days, not cautiously, naturally, because with Huda, expressions had consequences, with Adriana, expressions had space. When they kissed, it wasn't drama or explosive or tied to a meltdown, it was calm, mutual, without fear, and that calmness hit the villa harder than any argument ever did, because it proved what everyone had been silently thinking. Jeremiah was never the problem, the relationship was. While Jeremiah was finally feeling normal, Huda switched gears. Suddenly, she was moving on, getting to know new people, acting unbothered, trying to reclaim her power. But the villa could see it wasn't peace, it was strategy. Her eyes still tracked Jeremiah, her conversation still orbited around him. Everything she said still framed her as the victim of his choices. Even when she acted calm, her behaviour betrayed her. She was watching, waiting, hoping for a crack in Jeremiah's stability. Because Huda didn't want Jeremiah back, she wanted the dynamic back, the intensity, the chaos, the emotional feather. And now Jeremiah was given that feather to someone else who didn't treat it like a weapon. This is the moment everything shifted. Jeremiah wasn't traumatized, he wasn't broken, he wasn't closed off. The second he was free from the chaos, he functioned normally. Huda didn't break him, but she exhausted him, and Adriana was proof. With Huda, Jeremiah survived. With Adriana, Jeremiah lived.